Hi everyone. How you doing? It is 3:31 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. Bitcoin is currently at $21,602, which is up. It's up this week. Bitcoin is having something of a little rally. Ethereum is at $1,236, also up. And my favorite micro cap coin is not up. It's down 0.59%. Giddy is still at 6 cents, not up in any meaningful sense. Not up at all, not in a literal or metaphorical or grammatical or any other sense. It's down, it's just down. But Bitcoin is up, the market broadly is up. And that's good. You might notice I've got headphones on today. If you're watching, if you're listening, that's fine. I'm going to try to do everything so that you can just listen and enjoy my soothing voice explaining the truths of the Bitcoin world. But if you are watching on YouTube, I have my headphones on. Why do I have my headphones on? Well, something you might not know about this little setup where I do my YouTube channel. I'm in an office, and behind the wall behind me, that black wall that you see, behind that is an event space. Now, I usually record these live streams in the morning. I usually don't do them in the afternoon. There are not usually events in the morning. There are usually events in the evening. There are occasionally events in the afternoon, like right now. 3:32 p.m., there is an event happening. They are being loud. So I have my noise-canceling headphones on so that I can focus. I've turned up the volume on the mic. This is also in response to some feedback from people telling me that it was a bit too quiet. Bear with me, friends. You might hear some chatter in the background. I've already spent too much time chatting about that. Let's dive into what's going on, shall we? First, what everybody seems to care about, price action. Let's look at price action. This is from Will Clemente, who's an analyst on Twitter. He's a 20-year-old. 20 years old sounds so young to me. I am 39 years old. I'm nearly twice this man's age. There was a futurist named Alvin Toffler who I saw speak at the National Association of Broadcasters in 2008. He is the author of a book called Future Shock and a lot of other things. One of his theories was that as technology continues to accelerate, more and more of our society will be controlled by younger and younger people. That we were on a centuries-long trend from an agrarian society where the person who has the most experience is the most valuable. And that's grandpa, that's the old people. We've been doing the same thing over and over for centuries. Why would it ever change? Grandpa has the most experience, he's the guy that has the power. To an industrial society where people need to have vigor and vim and capability. That's the dad, that's the mom, that's the able-bodied, middle-aged adults. To the information society, where people need not only to learn rapidly, but to unlearn and relearn rapidly. And who is that? Basically, that is children. Maybe not children proper, maybe not legally children, but even still, a lot of the influencers on the internet are dramatically young, very young, like this guy, Will Clemente. 20 years old is very young. He probably has an inordinate amount of sway given his age. Lead insights analyst at Blockware Team, not a group I'm familiar with. He writes a Bitcoin newsletter to 70,000 investors. Good for you, Will. This is Will's analysis, reaction to the 200-week moving average. It should be quite telling, he says. A reclaim of the 200-week moving average, essentially the reclaim of which, essentially making everything below a deviation, would be a nice swing long setup for traders and probably triggers some trend algorithms. Rejection would be no bueno, would not be good. Take a look at the chart. We are under the 200-week moving average. That blue line shows the moving 200-week average, and that line basically just goes up throughout all of Bitcoin's history, while the day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month, price action is all over the place, very volatile. The averaged out 200-week is very smooth, and it always goes up, and it is very rare for the price to be under the 200-week moving average. Well, we've not only gone under the 200-week moving average, we've spent 3 weeks under the 200-week moving average. We're up this week. We're that little green candle right there. These 200-week moving averages, the theory of technical analysis says that these lines act as support, where if price is above that line and drops down and hits the support moving average line, then it more than likely will bounce off. But if it's a powerful enough drop that it breaks through, that line is now resistance. It becomes hard for the price to get above that line. Historically, we have stayed above the 200-week moving average almost always. It's very rare for us to go under. We went under at the beginning of 2020. We touched that line in 2019, beginning of 2019. There are some instances from prior years where we go under for a number of weeks, but it's very short-lived most of the time. This 3-week stretch is historically rare. We're up. We're getting back close to the 200-week moving average. Are we going to go above, or are we going to bounce off? Bouncing off would be really bad. Really bad. It's all relative, right? What it means is that the price is not going to go up soon. It's a rejection saying that we're going to stay below this moving average for probably some time more. That seems unlikely to me, given how rare it is for us to be under the 200-week moving average. There's that noise I was telling you about. It's pretty rare for us to be under that 200-week moving average at all. And it's very rare for us to spend time under there. Could we bounce off and go lower? Yeah, it seems possible. Anything's possible. I'm not, and nobody should tell you that they know exactly what's going to happen. If they do, they're lying, and they could absolutely be wrong and lead you astray. The good technical analysts always give you this caveat. They always tell you, I don't know what's going to happen. All I can do is basically guess at probabilities. So my guess here, as a very novice technical analyst, is to look at this and to think, you know what? We're probably going to see a relief rally soon where the price goes up in a meaningful way. We've already seen that a little bit this week with that green arrow. We're at $21,606 on Bitcoin. That's up substantially from just a few days ago when we were at below 20,000. Wouldn't be shocking to me if we saw a rally. Also wouldn't be shocking to me if that rally didn't last long. Right? Maybe we have a rally that lasts the remainder of July. But is the bull market over? Or the bear market, excuse me. Is the bear market over? Well, no. The macroeconomic picture is not dramatically different. All kinds of questions up in the air. People are very worried about the real estate market. Big picture, people are worried about the bond market. The macroeconomic picture is not better somehow. There's no reason that we should be getting way up on the Bitcoin price when the entire globe is economically precarious. So maybe we see a July rally. It seems like the chart says that's possible. Big picture, I am not confident in that rally sustaining. Not at all. All right. That's way more chart analysis than I usually do, but I've been watching these chart analysts for couple years, and I've started to do amateur chart analysis myself. That's technical analysis. The other way that people guess at the price action is what's called fundamentals. And this is talking about the things that are happening in the space. The fundamentals are the headlines. It's the story we tell ourselves about the asset. So here's Dan Held, a regular tweeter and Bitcoin guy that we talk about on my little show. This is fundamental analysis. He says, was that the bottom for Bitcoin? Mass contagion feels contained with FTX. The contagion being the fallout, the dominoes falling from UST and Luna to Celsius to Voyager and BlockFi and others. The mass contagion feels contained with FTX. Celsius paying off their BTC loan. We're going to talk about that more a bit later. Celsius has paid off all of their loans. Bankruptcies already filed. Inflation fears are cooling off. The problem with a fundamentals analysis is you can tell yourself any kind of story you want. You can say, look, I've got evidence, right? Here are these things that happened, and it tells me that things are looking up. All right, you can pick and choose your headlines. You can editorialize all day long. If you have an idea that you want to advance, you can find evidence to support that theory. It might be a little bit of evidence relative to the broad picture, the mountain of other evidence that might reject what you're saying. So I'm actually dubious and skeptical of what's called fundamentals analysis. Also, I'm skeptical of this because I've seen how these narratives get crafted. I've worked in marketing, PR, advertising. I've worked in marketing at a cryptocurrency company. and I know how this stuff gets put together. And it's not always, it's not usually the company telling you everything that's going on at face value. They're painting the most rosy positive picture they possibly can. They have every incentive to do that. So, if the company is telling you everything is great and we have these huge partnerships right on the horizon and just you wait, things are going to be awesome, then be skeptical of that. Notably, Bitcoin is not a company. It's not like somebody's crafting headlines about Bitcoin trying to drive the price higher. It would have to be a heck of a whale to do something like that. You could accuse somebody like Michael Saylor of doing that. I don't believe that's true. I think he is a genuine believer, but he's also heavily incentivized to do whatever he can to make people very optimistic about Bitcoin. Anyway, my 2 cents about fundamentals analysis. Here's a little bit more chart analysis. This from the Crypto Lark, Lark Davis, another YouTuber and commentator. Bitcoin is coiling up. I like that phrase, actually. This is the first time I've seen that. It's a good metaphor. Coiling up like a snake, ready to pounce. Volatility is incoming. So what we see here is a flag, right? We see the price action bouncing between 2 bounds, up and down, and those bounds are narrowing, and they're coming to a point. So what happens when the price action reaches that point? Does it go up or down? Well, obviously it has to do one or the other. The insinuation here is that we can trust that pattern to continue up until that point, and at that point it has to break out one direction or the other. This is another seeming indicator saying that we could see a July rally. We could see a relief rally where the price jumps up. Maybe it breaks out of this flag sooner than that. I don't know. Again, I am a novice in these technical analysis areas. If you want deep analysis, I recommend Benjamin Cohen. He's a YouTuber that has a prolific channel where he does lots of great analysis. He also has a paid community, of which I am a member, where he shares further analysis and a lot of valuable tools. Moving on. From Watcher Guru, someone transferred $81,215,000 in Bitcoin and paid a fee of $147. That's a transaction fee of 0.000181%. No government, bank, or third party had to verify the transaction, nor could they have stopped it if they wanted to. All right, why is this important? It's a demonstration of the fundamental case for Bitcoin. At the bottom of all of this is permissionless money, unconfiscatable money, non-political money. It's freedom money. It's independent money. You could never do this with dollars. You just couldn't. Have you ever tried to move money across borders, especially a meaningful sum? Try it sometime. I had to pay somebody in Great Britain, a couple of years ago, wiring them money. It was a huge pain. I ran a business, a production company a few years ago, and the bank made a mistake, and I kid you not, they lost $250,000. Couldn't find it for a couple days. I finally realized that both the person paying me and the bank had both made separate mistakes that sent the money to a different account that shouldn't have even existed. But that happened. What Bitcoin does is it gives you control, sovereign individual control. And you can mess that up. You can make your mistakes, but they're yours to own, just like the money itself. Nobody else can get in your way. They can't tell you you're not allowed. They can't tell you that they take a 10% fee. They can't tell you that it has to pass through this committee. You get to do with your money what you want to. That's the power of Bitcoin. It is powerful. And that's why I was interested in this from day one. It was obvious that this was an unstoppable force. A distributed network that can do something that was never possible before, that actually solved a decades-old computer science problem called the Byzantine generals problem about the role of a third party in a transaction. How do you trust somebody to do a thing for you? How do you do a thing with a third party, with a second party that you haven't previously done business with? Can you trust them? Can you trust a third party? With Bitcoin, you don't have to. You have a network of integrity where everybody's checking everybody else. This is a powerful idea, and we can't forget it, right? Regardless of what the price action does, this remains true. You can transfer any amount of money to anyone, anywhere in the world for fractions of a penny, or, fractions of the value of the transaction. This person did it for $147 for $81 million transferred. And nobody can get in your way. Not the NSA, not the CIA, not Joseph Biden, not anyone. Aliens couldn't stop you. Moving on. Something happy is going on in the next room. People are cheering. They're very happy in whatever that event is. So good for them. Maybe it's a wedding reception. Good job, guys. Congratulations on your nuptials. This is from Guy Swan, the quintessential BTC maximalist. He's retweeting Peter Schiff. Now, we mentioned Peter Schiff's fiasco with his bank. He owned a bank in Puerto Rico. Schiff says, despite no evidence of crimes, Puerto Rico regulators closed my bank anyway for net capital issues rather than allow a sale to a highly qualified buyer promising to inject capital far in excess of regulatory minimums. As a result, accounts are frozen and customers may lose money. Peter Schiff owned a bank. Regulators decided for whatever reason that they didn't like this bank, and they just declared that he was insolvent, even though he was not at all. He just wasn't. This is the kind of thing that happens when you are subject to politicized regulators. And don't kid yourself, regulators are absolutely politicized. We live in a world where damn near everything is politicized. It's infuriating. And what is politics? Politics is the practice of finding and using power over other people. At its heart, at its core, at the bottom of it all, that's what politics is. A lot of us aren't interested in politics in that sense. I am neither interested in being controlled nor in controlling others. If you put me in a room and somebody needs to take a leadership role, I will not be interested in that leadership role unless I realize that somebody has to fill it and nobody else is doing that. Then I'm comfortable stepping into a leadership position, but I actually don't have any draw to puppeteer, control other people. Not in my nature. It's definitely not in my nature to be controlled and to be okay with that. But this is what happens. This is what happens when you work in these politicized bureaucracies, these politicized frameworks. Schiff got shut down. He didn't do anything wrong. He wasn't in debt. They shut him down because they just wanted to. And I think Guy Swan had an appropriate response here. I really appreciate this. We're going to talk about maximalism. Surprise, surprise. I talk about it every day. We're going to talk about this a bit more in the future, but I really like Guy Swan's approach here. He says, legit, I'm sorry for you, Peter Schiff. You really got effed over on this one. Hope you get it sorted out. Solidarity fist. This is why money and banking cannot be fixed from the inside. This is how broken and corrupt and political it is. This is absolutely true. And there's more and more discussion around this, that our money is fundamentally political now, where historically people didn't question it. It didn't seem like it was political money. And now that has changed. People are realizing, they're understanding that the dollars you use are politically created, politically controlled. And that by engaging with them and using them, you are subjecting yourself to those political machinations. This is why Bitcoin matters. Another of Peter Schiff's tweets and a response. This is screenshotted by Bitcoin Magazine. An exchange between Peter Schiff and Nayib Bukele, the president of El Salvador. From Peter Schiff, Bitcoin has failed to live up to the hype, and those institutions that put a toe in the water last year are not likely to take the plunge. This year, most will opt to cut their losses and sell. I doubt Michael Saylor, and Nayib Bukele have enough dry powder to keep the market propped up. He thought it was them all along, just keeping the price up. He tweeted this January 17th, 2022, and then like yesterday or today, Nayib Bukele responded, "How's your bank going, Peter?" Ouch. I do genuinely feel bad for Peter Schiff, despite all of his hate and rhetoric against Bitcoin. He's wrong about that, but you don't have to wish ill on somebody just because they're wrong. With Peter Schiff, it's kind of a shtick. It's a joke. He's made himself more famous and probably brought in more business by being against Bitcoin. I hope he comes over and joins the fold someday. I genuinely do. And I hope when that happens, people can have the good sense to welcome him in. You should, if you care about your big, powerful ideas, then you should always be ready to welcome in people who become converted to your big ideas. Even if they were formerly your opponent or your enemy, right? You should be ready to welcome people into the fold. If you don't do that, you're severely limiting the strength of your movement. Speaking of Nayib Bukele, this is from Bitcoin Archive. From El Salvador, $52 million in remittances received in 2022 through the official Chivo wallet. So a lot of people have kind of made fun of Nayib Bukele, saying like, oh, your big national investment in Bitcoin isn't paying off. Well, they have received $52 million in remittances through the Chivo wallet, presumably paying little to no transaction costs, which would absolutely not be the case if you were using something like Western Union, right? Those legacy institutions took days. You had to have documentation. You had to, and they, of course, scraped a ton off the top. They have to take their share, their pound of flesh, their cream off the top. Bitcoin doesn't do that. Not in any meaningful sense, especially if you're using Lightning Network. So good on Nayib Bukele, good on El Salvador, good on the people of El Salvador. And the nation-state adoption seems to be rolling forward slowly. The president of Senegal met with the CEO of the world's biggest Bitcoin exchange, Binance. There they are, ladies and gentlemen. This is a tweet from Bitcoin Magazine. CZ Binance has been on kind of a rampage lately, meeting with a lot of leaders of smaller nation states, persuading them to the virtues of, I'm going to say crypto, because that's what he deals in, is cryptocurrency. But he's a reasonable person. CZ is absolutely bullish on Bitcoin and understands its centrality and importance. He probably, I'm sure, will advance other cryptos as well. Again, we will talk about maximalism in a bit. I don't think this is a bad movement or a bad faith move or a bad development. Push forward adoption. And another country dealing with Bitcoin. This is from Documenting Bitcoin at Documenting BTC. And they retweet a New York Times article. Quote, Venezuelan military personnel at the borders have a reputation for seizing the money of people who want to leave. But Juan's being in Bitcoin was accessible only with a password he had memorized. Bitcoin is money that other people can't take away from you and they can't control. Saylor talks about this all the time. If you really want to dig into it, spend some time on that topic, listen to Michael Saylor. I'm happy to see this from the New York Times, an institution that I have actually lost a great deal of respect and trust for. But this is a good take on their part. Thank you for covering this, New York Times. And it's not just anecdotal, and it's not just this one individual. I personally interviewed 3 different people from Venezuela who were dealing with trying to preserve their buying power and help their family by transferring that value to them as well. 3 people who used Bitcoin to save themselves and their family, one of whom saved dozens of members of his own family from starvation, basically. He started out doing like really remedial, dumb tasks for micropayments online, doing like CAPTCHAs, literally just doing CAPTCHAs and getting paid micropayments for that, and worked his way into better and better schemas until he was working for an American company that paid him in Bitcoin. And while the Venezuelan currency hyperinflated, he suddenly became, relatively speaking, much, much, much richer than the people around him. And because it was in Bitcoin, he could actually control it himself. And the officials around couldn't do anything about it. And he could put food on the table for his family. This is why this stuff matters, you guys. These centralized institutions are not your friends. They don't care about you. They care about power. That's how you become powerful, it turns out, is by caring about power above all else. Continuing with the theme of sovereign nation adoption. Just in, hereditary Prince of Serbia and Yugoslavia suggests that Jordan and the United Arab Emirates, UAE, could soon adopt Bitcoin. Says, according to Quran, Bitcoin is their perfect money. Arab money. What does that mean? According to the Quran, the Muslim book of scripture, Bitcoin is their perfect money. Well, as it turns out, historically, it is deeply ingrained in the Islamic religion that usury is wicked and evil and wrong. Usury is defined, at least in the Oxford English Dictionary, as the illegal action and practice of lending money at unreasonably high rates of interest. Well, according to these Islamic theologians, any interest is unreasonably high. You're not allowed to charge interest in the most extreme examples of this. This is ingrained into the Muslim religion. So, the Serbian prince is suggesting that Bitcoin is perfect Muslim money. According to him, most of these monarchies use the Sharia law that, among other things, entails a specific financial system that doesn't recognize the concept of debt. Therefore, they might be open to accepting a pitch for Bitcoin as the perfect money in line with this system. Quote, according to the readings of the Quran, is actually that Bitcoin is the perfect money. It's just a matter of time until someone pitches that idea to them or they pitch it to themselves and they get on board. Maybe you'll see an Arab monarchy or an Arab country here or there adopting Bitcoin a lot sooner than you think. I can tell you from personal experience that the government of UAE is keenly aware of Bitcoin. They are not ignorant of this topic. They have been looking at it for a long time. I shouldn't say much about that, but I know a guy. How about that? I know a guy who clues me into this stuff. So yeah, that would not be surprising if UAE and maybe some other Arab nations adopted Bitcoin because it is not debt. It is fundamentally property, not debt. And this is probably something we should talk about at length later. Dollars are debt. The dollars you get from the bank, the dollars printed by the federal government. Part of why we should talk about this later is it's two reasons. One, I think it's incredibly important. And two, I don't understand it enough myself. So after I spend some time with this, we will talk about it more. Just know that dollars are debt. The dollar in your pocket is a debt somewhere else. Somebody else owes that dollar. Bitcoin is not that way. Bitcoin is property. It's property that you own that nobody else has a debt on. Moving on. This is on Twitter from Raphael Schoen. His bio says magic internet money and other stuff. Content lead at Rely app, previously Bitpanda and Vice. So I don't really know Raphael Schoen, but he does have a check mark, so I guess that's good or bad depending on your feeling for check marks. I bring it up just because I like what he has to say here. Withdraw your Bitcoin on a hardware wallet. Don't stake, lend, or leverage. Just wait. It's quite simple. And I didn't always agree with this, but I do now. It should be clear that this simple strategy actually is a way better strategy than lending it out on centralized exchanges, staking it somewhere where it might get hacked, or leveraging it in a way that you could get wiped out when the market tanks. Just buy your Bitcoin and sit on it in self-custody. Right now, the accepted way to do that, the most secure way that people trust, is a hardware wallet. So again, another topic we should dive into: how to use hardware wallets. What hardware wallets do I recommend? Speaking of hardware wallets, Bitcoin Magazine reports that sales of Bitcoin hardware wallets are increasing despite the price drop. We're down about 70% from all-time highs, but people are buying hardware wallets at record rates. Strong hands in the making, my friends. More people holding in personal custody. What bugs me about this report, though, is that they didn't cite a source. If you're a news outlet, if you're reporting a factual claim, you need to say where you got that from. Is this from research that they did? Is it from reports from the hardware suppliers? Who is saying this? I actually tweeted back at them and asked them, what's the source on this info? We will see if they ever reply. Also from Bitcoin Magazine, Bloomberg senior analyst, Bitcoin could soon kickstart the greatest bull market in history. I say that with a little bit of irony in my voice, not because I don't believe that that couldn't be true. It absolutely could. I just am dubious of Bloomberg senior analyst. We see so many headlines that cite some vague analyst at some big financial institution or name like Bloomberg or JP Morgan or whoever. These guys seem to vacillate back and forth all the time, where it's doomed or it's going to the moon. They just have this air of legitimacy around them that I find doesn't hold true in my experience. They're not more right than the plebs, right? A smart YouTuber can be just as right or more right than a Bloomberg senior analyst. Personally, I trust Benjamin Cohen's analysis more than I trust a Bloomberg senior analyst. Flat out. I've seen Benjamin's work. I understand the caveats involved. He doesn't ever make hollow promises. He just says, this is my guess and this is the probability that I think it's true. A Bloomberg senior analyst, I don't know who that is. And I've seen so many headlines like this where it says literally opposite things within days of each other. Anyway, for what it's worth, I think this could generally be broadly true, but it's also not a bounded theory. Could soon kickstart the greatest bull run in history. Okay, how soon is soon? How long a bull run are we talking about? How is this time bounded? Are we talking about the next few months? Are we talking about the next couple years? Are we talking about the next 5 years? What kind of bull run are we talking about? I would need to dive in. I'm not going to do that. Again, Bitcoin Magazine. Just in, 40% of investors see Bitcoin as the best investment over the next 3 months. Now, this one is at least time-bounded. This is from an Opinio survey. I am similarly dubious of surveys. You're just looking at what people think is going to happen. The market is, frankly, often wrong, right? People who were buying in November were wrong. And we talk about smart money and dumb money in the investment world, and dumb money is supposedly the plebs. It's the retail investors. It's folks like you and me who just have a little bit of cash and are trying to put it somewhere so it earns buying power. Smart money, supposedly, is professional investors, Wall Street investors. Well, if you're not dubious of Wall Street investors, look into the GameStop situation from a couple years ago. Understand that those people are not necessarily smarter than a good analyst on Reddit. They do have something of a privileged position, and they kind of stack the deck in their favor sometimes. Chamath Palihapitiya, who I've mentioned here before and had a really hard time remembering his name, but his name is Chamath Palihapitiya. There's a great clip of him on, I believe, CNBC during the whole GameStop thing. Chamath is a billionaire. Chamath is a really sharp dude. There's a reason they had him on the show, but he said some pretty unorthodox things, anti-establishment things on this clip. Chamath said basically, a good analyst on Reddit is as good as anybody I've ever met on Wall Street. And we have this idea that the Wall Street guys are smarter, better, more capable. They're just not anymore. Groups of strangers can coordinate quite capably online in whatever forum they choose. And as it turns out, they're pretty good at parsing the data and figuring out where things might go. So, 40% of investors see Bitcoin as the best investment over the next 3 months from an Opinio survey. Maybe. As always, do your own research. Don't just trust some nameless survey. I don't know who these investors were. Also, it depends on how you parse this data. 40% of investors see Bitcoin as the best investment over the next 3 months. Does that mean that 60% of the investors believe it's not? Did 60% of the investors agree on something else? Get the whole picture before you make decisions. From Dennis Porter. Dennis Porter is the CEO and co-founder at Satoshi Act Fund. If you care about decarbonizing the grid, you should be obsessed with Bitcoin proof-of-work mining. Without it, your efforts will fail. Smart climate researchers and environmentalists are already beginning to see this. Okay, I've mentioned this before. I think proof-of-work is really important, and it's actually really good for the energy grid and for decarbonizing the grid. If we build the Bitcoin mining world with this in mind, it does a couple things. One, it's a constructive narrative that kind of, what's the term I'm looking for? It makes the attack toothless when people want to attack Bitcoin for boiling the oceans. Now, some people might say, and I'm sympathetic to this, that we should completely ignore that objection because it's illegitimate to begin with. They're not holding other things up to the same scrutiny at all. And they also seem to assume in their objection that Bitcoin has no real utility. It has no usage. It's just a few 100,000 American fintech bros trying to get rich quick. Never mind that people over here in, where are we looking? that our existing financial system is politicized and stacked against even good people, that El Salvador and Senegal and Venezuela need Bitcoin. No, ignore all that. It's just a few 100,000 American fintech bros trying to get rich. I think proof of work creates a buyer of last resort for energy production. It incentivizes decentralized energy production on the grid, which is intensely needed because that creates robustness and stability, where we've seen massive brownouts and blackouts statewide in places like California and Texas. We need more energy production in more places. And if you can put a Bitcoin miner there to make sure that they have a baseline purchaser, you're good to go. We need more work on this front. I think this is the area where the Bitcoin world has an opportunity to demonstrate to people that their objections are false and this can actually build a better world for us in more ways than one. Positive externalities to the fundamental case of Bitcoin of just being better money. Oh, I'm only halfway through my tabs, you guys. I got a lot today. From Alex Gladstein, speaking of making the world a better place, Gladstein is the president, chief strategy officer at the Human Rights Foundation. I've attended their annual conference in New York, the Oslo Freedom Fest, and I've met Gladstein before, and he's a good guy. He's genuinely dedicated himself to making people more free and fighting authoritarianism around the world, and he's, in the last couple of years, become a firm Bitcoin believer, and I'm very happy about that. Gladstein, retweeting the Wall Street Journal. Wall Street Journal editorial board goes after the SEC chief. Quote, Gensler's Bitcoin regulation grab. Maybe members of Congress should call him to explain why he's undermining crypto innovation and investor protections and remind him who controls the agency's purse strings. So this is true. I'm going to talk about Balaji Srinivasan more at the end of this live stream. But in Balaji Srinivasan's interview with Tim Ferriss, they were talking about India, and they were talking about recent legislation in India and how friendly it is to technology. It talks about drones, it talks about cryptocurrency, it talks about all of these things. And how can we make these more available and create a framework where these can go out without hindrance? Where in the United States, we can't even get the SEC to let people buy Bitcoin at an institutional level, right? If you're trying to get exposure to Bitcoin's upside via the stock market, you have to buy a futures ETF. There's no spot ETF. And Gary Gensler is the one who's done that. And it's becoming more and more clear, like, you're creating a hostile environment to genuine financial innovation. Why are you doing this? And I don't have an answer to that. I don't know why he's rejecting the spot ETF. Maybe I need to dive into this Wall Street Journal opinion piece. Anyway, more and more people are becoming very unhappy with Gary Gensler. Ryan Selkis, who's the founder of Masari, at 2-Bit Idiot, calls him Goldman Gary, like the guy just works at Goldman Sachs. I think he used to. Ryan Selkis, at 2-Bit Idiot, founder of Masari, he is no friend of Gary Gensler, and I tend to agree with Ryan Selkis. I think he's one of the more thoughtful people in the space with a even-keeled view of what's going on. He was also one of the very first people to call out the flu in China as being something that would be very problematic here in the West at the beginning of 2020. He saw it before other people did, he and Balaji. In fact, there's a great episode of a podcast interview between them where they're talking about this well before other people are tuned in to what was going on in China. Gary Gensler's Bitcoin regulation grab. The SEC chief is blocking innovation until he can control crypto markets. It's the wrong way to go, guy. Stop trying to control everything. From Peter McCormick, the podcaster who does What Bitcoin Did. He does a lot of other things at this point, but that's what he's famous for. Can anyone clearly define what Bitcoin maximalism is? He asks. It's a good question. Really, it is. And so let's look at the answers. Stephen Livera responds. Stephen is a Bitcoin podcaster and a writer at Bitcoin Magazine. He said, I view Bitcoin maximalism as the belief that Bitcoin will be the money of the world someday. It's not a statement that all altcoins will immediately go to zero, as some altcoin apologists love to strawman. Now, he's saying it's a strawman. I disagree. You take out this word immediately, and that is exactly what Bitcoin maximalists believe. It is a statement that all altcoins will go to zero, And that is what Bitcoin maximalists believe. It's the counterpoint, right? They believe that Bitcoin will become the world's money, and it will be the only money, and everything else will go to zero. If that ever happens, a big, huge hypothetical if, I think it will take a very long time. Where most Bitcoin maximalists, the hardline maximalists, believe that it will happen in an event called hyper-Bitcoinization, basically a singularity where suddenly Bitcoin takes over everything. It becomes the only monetary instrument in the world. I don't even know how they think that's going to happen, and I could be wrong, but I don't see it, guys. I just don't. Mr. Hodl, I don't know who Mr. Hodl is. I think he's just a popular Twitter anon. He's got 47,000 followers. He says that altcoins will exist like penny stocks exist today. He also says, my definition of a scammer in the space is when you know that all blockchains share the same externality costs, but selling them as an alternative to Bitcoin. I'm not even sure I consider myself a maximalist. Interesting. I think I'm just a Bitcoiner knowing that we only have one shot at this. That's an interesting idea. We only have one shot at this, right? If we're going to fundamentally reinvent the financial monetary infrastructure of the world, we've got one shot at this. It's not like we can keep trying alternate systems. Won't work. I agree with him. I don't think I consider myself a maximalist. I was talking to my wife about this, heaven bless her patience and listening to me talk about this endlessly. But she said, maybe you should call yourself maximal-ish, which I thought was very clever. My marketer wife came up with that. So cheers. Here's to being maximal-ish. I'm a Bitcoin maximal-ish. If that's the case, Mr. Hodl, I feel like there are a lot of smart people who agree with you, who are kind of being chased out of the camp and don't want to identify as maximalists because it's so, fundamentalist in its nature. Moving on, Robinhood enables Bitcoin transactions for all users. So this is nice. Anybody who's using Robinhood could buy Bitcoin. You can also transfer out of Robinhood, I heard, which is good. Get your coins off of Robinhood, even if that's where you buy them. This also just happened a few hours ago. Celsius has now paid off its loan to Maker. So Celsius has now paid off all of its loan. Celsius Network continues to make moves, prompting calls to resume withdrawals, which would be awesome. I would love it if Celsius opened up withdrawals again. It would be very difficult for them because capital would immediately flee. People would withdraw tons of money from their account. So they have to kind of be sure that they won't be zeroed out if they open up withdrawals again. I still have $2,400 on there, USD coin. I forgot it was there. I'd like to have that back. That would be nice. Let's look at what Celsius has been doing. On July 2nd, they paid off $67 million to Maker, Aave, and Compound. Also on July 2nd, they paid off $15 million to Aave. On July 3rd, they paid off $50 million to Aave. On July 4th, they paid off $50 million to Maker. On July 4th, they paid off $24 million to Compound. And also on July 4th, they paid off $64 million to Maker. In paying down their Maker loan on July 4th, Celsius cleared its entire loan with the protocol. On-chain analysis shows the company took a $1 billion loss on the contract. However, the company did receive back 21,962 wrapped Bitcoin worth about $440 million as returned collateral. Speculation mounts on whether the company will dump this to shore up its balance sheet. We'll see. We'll see what they do. Again, I've mentioned this before. I'm incredibly impressed with what Alex Mashinsky is doing, right? Obviously, there was a lapse in leadership for them to get into this position in the first place. Clearly, something went catastrophically wrong. But for them to still be alive at this point, they haven't declared bankruptcy. They are paying off loans. They're figuring things out. 3 Arrows Capital went bankrupt. Voyager, a publicly traded company, went bankrupt. Celsius? I'm rooting for Mashinsky, rooting for him to figure this out. Not just because I've got $2,400. I've basically written that off already. But it would be nice to have their I've read two different numbers, 1.2 or 1.8 million customers made whole again and be able to withdraw their funds. Here's an opinion piece from CoinDesk about Nick Carter versus the Bitcoin maximalists. Again, there's this ongoing, feud between hardline Bitcoin maximalists and people like Nick Carter, who believe that Bitcoin is absolutely the future and it's important and it's valuable and it's going to be high and to the right. They just don't believe that it's literally going to be the only monetary asset valuable in the future. If that's the standard, if you believe it's Bitcoin or nothing, Bitcoin and nothing else, then I am not a maximalist, and I don't think I can be. And I don't think most smart people who are serious about the world and seeing real reform and change, I don't think most people would agree with that. A lot of the Bitcoin maximalists are total anons. They're laser eyes, cartoon anons. One account that was attacking Nick Carter that catalyzed a ton of this, I don't remember who she was, but I say she, I don't know if it's a she. I'm assuming their gender. It's an anon Twitter account, and it had some big busty babe on it, and she had not laser eyes, but laser tits. Like, come on. These are the people who are driving the narrative? You're going to drive out thoughtful, capable, fully doxed and out in the open analysts like Nick Carter and in favor of laser tits? That's who's leading your movement? To my maximalist friends, I tell you to reconsider your stance here. Twitter anons who believe in just repeating maxims over and over and decrying anybody who says that maybe there's more nuance here, it ain't going to work, guys. It ain't going to work. It's also definitely not going to draw converts to your cause. Don't be a fundamentalist. Don't. Look at this in any religious sect. The fundamentalists are not the people you want to join. That being said, I don't think Bitcoin maximalism is dead or dying. Nick basically indicated that it was. He did an interview with the Bankless podcast where he he talked about the decline of Bitcoin maximalism. I think he's totally wrong about that. If anything, this is an ascendant worldview. In fact, Balaji talked about this on the Tim Ferriss podcast, and he said that Bitcoin maximalism is the most important movement that most people don't know about right now. He's totally right. I find myself obsessing over this for some reason, and I got to tell you, to pat myself on the back, I'm pretty good at seeing these things before most people. I'm pretty good at seeing Bitcoin as an important movement before most people see it. I'm pretty good at seeing YouTube as an important movement before most people do. If you don't know me personally, you might not know this. In 2009, I became the face of a YouTube channel that through 2009, 10, 11, 12 got really big. We got mainstream press. We built a multi-million-dollar company. Now, that didn't result in me becoming a multimillionaire, and the sad decline of that company is another story for another day. But suffice it to say that I was in the Bitcoin scene and was a notable face in that scene in 2009 and became very well acquainted with all of the early YouTubers. If anybody was around in 2010 on Bitcoin, making a living, making videos, they probably knew who I was, and I probably knew who they were. I'm telling you guys, I'm pretty early to the party. In fact, on my Twitter bio, I say I'm tragically early to the party because I show up way too early. I check things out. I think it's really interesting, really fascinating, really important, but nobody else is there. Nobody else is at the party. So I end up drifting away and going and doing something else, as I did with YouTube, as I did with Bitcoin. And that has proven to be a mistake. What I need to do is stick around at the rest of the party and wait for the rest of the world to show up. So here I am, back on YouTube, back in Bitcoin, waiting for the rest of the world to show on up. This is from BTC Sessions. Bitcoin maximalism is dead is the new Bitcoin is dead. We all know how many times Bitcoin has been declared dead. Now people are saying Bitcoin maximalism is dead, and they're just as wrong. Sorry, Nick Carter. Really, I'm on your side. We all should be on your side, but I think you're wrong about Bitcoin maximalism dying. Stephen Livera again says Bitcoin maximalism has never been stronger. I think he's right. It's growing in strength, but it's not without its problems. Again, I don't call myself a maximalist, and the people that I look up to and that I regard as the smartest people in the space, they don't consider themselves maximalists. Maximalism is fundamentalism. It's shorthand. It's saying that you have a list of dogmas that don't really need to be analyzed or considered with nuance. You just have aphorisms that you repeat over and over. Bitcoin will be the only world money. Everything else is a shitcoin. Guys, just think. Just try to think. And I'm not saying you have to arise at a different conclusion, but you should apply your cognitive powers to understand why you're saying these things, why they would or would not be this way. from Pete Rizzo. Tweeting a quote from Satoshi Nakamoto. What if someone tries to buy all the Bitcoin? Here's Satoshi's answer from exactly 12 years ago. When someone tries to buy all the world's supply of a scarce asset, the more they buy, the higher the price goes. It's great for the people who owned it beforehand because they get to sell it at the corner at crazy high prices. Now, that's the Satoshi Nakamoto quote. I don't disagree with what he's saying, but I will say that this is probably incompatible with real Bitcoin maximalism. Why? Because hardcore Bitcoin maximalists say never sell your Satoshis, never sell your Bitcoin. Hold on to it literally forever. So if my buying power increases and I never actually buy anything, what have I gained? What have I gained? I find a lot of inconsistencies in these shorthand pseudo-religious dogmas within maximalism. Fundamentalism, religious, or in this case, Bitcoin fundamentalism, is intolerance. That's its prime characteristic, right? Somebody who is a religious fundamentalist, say a Muslim terrorist, is a religious fundamentalist, they have no tolerance for disagreements, shades of gray. Somebody wants to live a different way. Zero tolerance. You are entirely with us or you are our enemy. Look at this. Again, this is a Twitter anon. I don't know who plate licking pleb is. So many of these maximalist accounts are just some cartoon. This is not a doxed serious person. And they said, had to unfollow Crypto Mags. She was liking tweets about ETH. You're literally not allowed to talk about anything else. You sound like a religious fundamentalist guy. If people are not allowed to talk about something else or agree with a statement about something else, you're the crazy one, not them. You're narrowing the Overton window to a very small range of acceptable opinions, and you're going to excommunicate or expunge or combat anyone outside of your very narrow window. It's not a good growth strategy, sorry. Speaking of toxic maximalists, Max Kaiser here, folks. Max has been, well, like most things good and bad, Max has been an advocate for Bitcoin for many, many years and has done a ton to advance the cause and educate people. If you're not aware of his work, he's also just a really obnoxious person. He's genuinely annoying to listen to. His voice is annoying. His choice of words is annoying. He shouts and he insults, and I guess that makes for good video. But man, it's not something I respect and look up to and want to listen to. This is an example of Bitcoin maximalism. Battle getting more entrenched, Bitcoin versus altcoins war heating up, Bitcoin conviction rightfully increasing, altcoin desperation mounts. El Salvador versus Central African Republic is a great example. Maximalist El Salvador looking to double their GDP thanks to Bitcoin. Central African Republic about to be wiped out by altcoiners. Is there a real concrete statement here, or are you just basically saying we're going to win and you're going to lose? There isn't even an ideological underpinning to what he's saying here. These are not real thought leaders, guys. These are not serious people. I'm sorry. Serious people will have actual arguments. Serious people will explain the logic of a thing. Serious people will engage in discussion. They'll understand a counter argument and they'll rationally explain why they disagree with that counter argument. They won't shout you down. They won't call you a shitcoiner. Right? That's just ad hominem. It's just insulting you until you go away and then declaring that I've won. Sorry. As somebody who loves Bitcoin, it pains me to see the tone in the room. It pains me to see that this is what being a Bitcoiner has become. There needs to be a shift here, guys. This is not good. It's not good for adoption. It's not good for regulation. The optics are real bad. And I'm not talking about what you say. I'm not talking about your beliefs and views. I'm talking about how you communicate those and how you engage. Be fundamentalist all day in what you believe. You have to engage with the world on their level. You have to engage with ideas that you disagree with in a way that respects the person you're talking to. If you just disregard and reject anybody who disagrees with you, who isn't a part of your cult, sorry, you're going to remain a fringe cult forever, regardless of how cool your ideas are. All right, moving on. From Jason Williams, who is the author of Bitcoin Hard Money You Can't F With. Why is Ethereum important? The fact that he has to even ask this question is, I don't know, it just seems silly to me. Like, there's a ton being built on Ethereum, tons. And if you think that money is the only use for blockchain technology, then I can't think of a single other network technology that only has one utility, one use case. If you're just wholesale rejecting NFTs, for instance, we don't need NFTs. NFTs are garbage. They're just overpriced JPEGs. Okay, well, what about objects in the metaverse, right? Huge corporations are building this spatial web that we're calling the metaverse. Facebook changed their name to Meta. Apple is absolutely going to release some kind of spatial web augmented reality device in the near future. I imagine in the next year and a half. There are going to be objects in that, and if we want those objects to be able to travel from universe to universe, well, then they have to exist independent of that proprietary ecosystem. What is that? What have I just described? Digital objects that can travel from universe to universe, exist independent from any given metaspace? I've just described NFTs. NFTs are digital objects in the metaverse. Is anybody building NFTs on top of Bitcoin? They're going to exist. The metaverse is going to exist. I don't even have to guess at that. I just know that there are tons of major corporations that are spending many billions of dollars, spanning literally decades, to make this happen. None of that is happening on top of Bitcoin. Sorry. It's being built on Ethereum and compatible chains. Sorry. I wish it were otherwise. It's not. This is the same thing that Nick Carter says. He puts forward a rational argument and people just call him a shitcoin shill and get out of our club. Like, that's not an argument, you guys. You're not going to help yourselves with that. Shifting topics. Are you guys familiar with Mike Solana? M-I-C Solana. Mike is he works at Founders Fund, which is Peter Thiel's investment fund. He's also a personality on Twitter whom I listen to and pay attention to. I first became acquainted with him through his podcasts. He had a couple. He did one that was called Anatomy of Next. It was initially about the colonization of Mars and what that would look like someday. What are the practical steps that need to be taken to see that happen? He also did another podcast called, what was it called? Well, it was basically about heretics. It was about people who were doing things that were more or less outside the Overton window. He did some fascinating interviews on that. He also has an email list called Pirate Wires. And here he is talking about people vanishing, the population crisis. We were told all growing up that there were too many people in the world and we were going to kill the planet. And now there's an increasing opinion, something that I've believed for a long time, that we should be much more worried about population collapse, as Elon Musk has said. Elon Musk, who it turns out now has 9 children with several women, including a set of twins with one of his executives at Neural. What is his brain implant startup? Can't even remember. This just came out yesterday. Elon Musk had a set of secret twins with a different woman weeks after he had another secret baby with Grimes. Just doing my part, he says, to increase the global population so we don't have population collapse. Mark Andreessen was on the Joe Rogan podcast. Mark Andreessen is a really interesting, fascinating guy. He's the inventor of the web browser. And he's a principal at Andreessen Horowitz, a fascinating and very successful investment firm. You don't have to agree with these guys, but they're some of the smartest people in the room. You should pay attention to what they say. I'm looking forward to listening to that. Austin Allred, a Utah native who started initially Lambda School, now Bloom Tech, he tweeted and said, putting this prediction out here so I can point to it in the future. In the next year, some communication from the White House will allude to food shortages being good because they will in some way help alleviate the obesity epidemic. Set your reminder bots to see if he's right. This is maybe a joke, but it's so dead on. The current White House will blame anybody but themselves for problems that are clearly under their purview. I don't know what the Biden administration is actually doing other than trying to manage optics. It seems to be their full-time job, is blaming other people. Yikes, guys. I wish we had actual leadership in this country, but we just don't. Maybe we need a new country. How would we do that? Glad you asked. Let's look to Balaji Srinivasan. I mentioned that he wrote a book called The Network State, How to Start a New Country in the 21st Century. That book came out July 4th. I am embarrassed that I haven't yet started that book, but I'm going to binge read it now. And I mentioned yesterday that he did this interview with Tim Ferriss. For whatever reason, that was up on Tim's channel and then down, and then he re-uploaded it today. I highly recommend this podcast interview. Again, it's 3 hours, 19 minutes, 3 hours, 20 minutes. It's a great interview. Go listen to that. This is your homework. And then go download Balaji's book. I think it is only available in the electronic Kindle edition right now. That's fine. Download the Kindle edition and read it so that we can talk about this. I think this is really important. I think Balaji is hitting on ideas that most people don't see and don't understand how important they are now, but they are critically important. Going off script a little bit, not that I have a script, but just a few ideas that I wasn't planning on talking about. Balaji Srinivasan is thinking about this. He's brilliant, and he's, I believe, very right. Vinay Gupta is another personality on Twitter whom I don't always agree with, but I recognize that he is both brilliant and he's often right, and I often do agree with him. He's also worried about societal collapse, right? That's the implicit logic of Balaji writing this book. Why do we need a new kind of state or government? It's because the current one is crumbling, and we can stick our heads in the sand and decide that nothing could ever end the country, right? The United States is the United States. It's going to last forever. Look around, guys. Things are dire. They look really bad, not just inside our borders, but globally. It is an ugly state of affairs out there. Balaji Srinivasan is a brilliant thinker who is seriously looking at what does societal collapse look like and how can we address that? How can we fix it? How can we build so that this isn't as catastrophic as it might otherwise be? Vinay Gupta is thinking in the same vein, on the same topic. And even AI researcher Deep Prasad was talking about this recently on July 4th. He tweeted about the ages of the founding fathers. Guess what? They were in their 20s and 30s. They were not sage elder statesmen when they started the country. They became sage elder statesmen by starting the country, the United States of America. I'm worried. I'm worried about society. I'm worried about the future of money and freedom. I kind of want to get a whole bunch of Bitcoin in a cabin deep in the woods and a solid internet connection so that I can stay engaged and do good, important things from a safe distance from other people. That makes me sound crazy, I know, but that's the honest truth. All right, team. It was a really long stream today. I'll come back at you tomorrow with another one, and let me know down in the comments what you would like to discuss. We'll hit it again in a future video. Thanks.